I'm going to read two passages from the Bible first. I love reading the Bible to people, primarily because when I read the Bible, every word is worth listening to, which is not always true of my preaching. In the book of Exodus, God gave Moses 10 commandments. He said, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Number 1, you shall have no other gods before me. Number 2, you shall not make yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven above or on earth beneath or in the waters below. Number 3, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Number 4, honor your father and mother. Number 5, you shall not murder. Number 6, you shall not commit adultery. 7, you shall not steal. Sorry, I've got them out of wrong order, haven't I? That's 8. 9, you shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. And number 10 is a command not to be greedy, which would include not buying national lottery tickets. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. When the people saw the thunder and lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain in smoke, they trembled with fear. They stayed at a distance and said to Moses, speak to us yourself and we will listen, but don't have God speak to us or we'll die. And Moses said to the people, don't be afraid. God has come to test you, so that the fear of God will be with you, to keep you from sinning. But the people remained at a distance while Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. Now, in contrast to that, listen to what the New Testament says. You have not come to a mountain that can be touched and that is burning with fire, to darkness, gloom and storm, to a trumpet blast, or to such a voice speaking words, so that those who heard it begged that no further word be spoken to them, because they could not bear what was commanded. If even an animal touches this mountain, it must be stoned. The sight was so terrifying that Moses said, I am trembling with fear. But you have come to Mount Zion, to the heavenly Jerusalem, to the city of the living God. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, the judge of all men, to the spirits of righteous men made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. See to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. If they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, how much less will we if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven? At that time his voice shook the earth, but now he has promised, once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is, all created things, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. The world today is full of fears. Every day I meet people who are afraid. They're afraid of sickness, afraid of prostate and breast cancer, of AIDS, even of obesity. They're afraid of poverty. with the collapse of the financial markets. They're afraid of old age, of loneliness and helplessness. Of course, in this country, we are not afraid of earthquakes. They don't happen here. We're not afraid of famine. Our shops are full of food. We're not afraid of wars, even though there are wars in almost every other continent. But we're afraid of many things. Now, there are healthy fears which are good and unhealthy fears which are bad. We brought up our children to be afraid of the traffic, and that's a healthy fear. And we need to fear it. We taught our children to be afraid of fire, not to play with matches. It's a healthy fear. A healthy fear is one that leads you to the right action. But there are unhealthy fears, which we call phobias, which don't lead you to action, but lead you to paralysis. Fears like fear of open spaces or closed spaces, fear of water, fear of heights, fear of spiders. It's amazing how many people have a phobia of one kind or another. And it paralyzes them. It doesn't lead them to right action. It leads them to paralysis. Now, all our fears boil down to one: the fear of losing our existence. The instinct of self-preservation comes on top of every other instinct we have. And we are afraid of anything that threatens our well-being, our health, our happiness, whatever. And so basically, fear is of danger to ourselves, a threat to our existence. Ultimately, of course, that is the fear of death, because that's the one threat to your existence, to everybody in this room. And it's a threat that we may postpone, but we can't put off indefinitely. And it brings our existence here to an end, our relationships with our family to an end. It brings all our hopes and dreams to an end, as far as this life goes. And so death is the great fear. Though nowadays I find that people are more afraid of what might happen before they die than what might happen to them after they die. It's the dying that people seem more afraid of today than death itself. After all, we experience death every night. We go to sleep, and we cease to be conscious. And for the majority of people, that's all that death is. So we get into practice for it every night. But it's something more than that. I've found that the fear of death is basically the fear of what might happen afterwards to us. Well, now, there is one fear that I'm going to speak about tonight which is almost totally absent from today's society, and alas, even from today's church. And that is the fear of God, which, according to the Bible, is the beginning of wisdom. If you want to be a wise man or woman, then the very first thing you need to learn is to fear God. That is not necessary to be clever, but to be wise. It's the fundamental ingredient. So let's turn from society, where there seems such an absence of fear of God. When I read through the reports of our government and what they are saying and what they are doing, my reaction is, do they not fear God? That they should do such things? That they should make such promises and fail to keep them? Because God knows when you break your word. Don't they fear God? When I move in business circles and see just how business is being run, I ask the same question, don't they fear God? And above all, when I watch comedians on television, I ask, don't they fear God? They have no hesitation in ridiculing God, in making jokes about heaven and hell and the devil. Don't they fear God? And the answer is most of them don't. They fear a lot of other things, but there is no fear of the Lord. Just taking His name in vain is now so common that you wonder if they have any consciousness of His presence while they do so. Now, when I turn to the Bible, it is almost exactly the opposite of the society in which we live. The Bible is packed full of a little phrase of 3 words, don't be afraid. In fact, I counted up how many times the Bible says that, and it says it 366 times. Now, in my simple mind, that means once for every day of the year, including leap year. It is constantly telling us not to be afraid. Both Old and New Testaments, and Jesus' teaching is full of that little phrase. Don't be afraid. His disciples were afraid of the storm, they were afraid of the future, they were afraid of so many things, and constantly Jesus didn't just advise them, he commanded them not to be afraid of any of those things. And that's why a Christian is not afraid of any of those things, because we obey Jesus. That's why you never see a Christian worried. Now, you laughed at that, but Jesus not only expected, but commanded any disciple of his not to worry. It ought to be part of our witness and testimony to the world that Christians are not worried because they do not fear the things the world fears. But when our fears are the same as the next door neighbor who has no room for God, what kind of testimony do we have? When we are afraid of the very things that they're afraid of, we are no different from them, even if we go to church on Sunday. We are simply disobeying the commands of the Lord. Don't be afraid. And there it is all the way through. Why are we not to be afraid? Because, as the New Testament says, fear has torment. Fear has torment. It wears you down. It burns up your nervous energy. It doesn't do any good for you. If you're afraid, it saps your energy. But on the other hand, from beginning to end of the Bible, it does teach us one fear, and only one, and that is to fear God. But we don't do that either. The simple truth is that if you really fear God, you will fear nothing and no one else. But if you fear other things and other people, you cannot be fearing God at the same time. It's a contradiction. And so that's the choice before us. We either fear God or we're going to fear a whole lot of other things. And there are so many other things to fear. Your life can be full of fear. Or full of fears, plural. Well, now I just want to take a very quick sketch right through the Bible about the fear of the Lord. Because that is my burden. I just rarely encounter it, even in church. You see, the greatest danger to me, the greatest threat to me of all, is God. As the New Testament puts it, it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. A frightening thing to fall into the hands of God. I've heard preacher after preacher turn that verse upside down and say it's a fearful thing to fall out of the hands of the living God. But in fact, the Bible doesn't say that. It says it's a fearful thing to fall into them. To be in the hands of God is far more fearful than a speeding driver being in the hands of the police. Far more fearful. Why? Well, let's begin at the beginning. Do you know that in the Old Testament there are 15 different nouns and 10 different verbs to describe the fear of the Lord? They almost exhaust the vocabulary to do it. It begins right in the Garden of Eden. And it was God who taught Adam and Eve to fear him. He said, you touch that tree, that one tree, and you die the death. So they didn't touch it. They were afraid of what God would do to them if they did. It was a healthy fear. It led them to the right action, to keep off what God did not want them to touch. And then the devil came along and he taught them not to fear the Lord. He said he didn't mean it. You won't really die. No, he's just jealous of his own authority. He doesn't want you to know what he knows. And if he had not been able to remove the fear of the Lord from Adam and Eve, they would never have touched the tree.